It took 45 years, but today President Trump has begun fulfilling a promise that Republicans have been making since 1980. With the stroke of a pen, he signed an executive order to begin the process of closing the Department of Education, returning control of our schools to where it constitutionally belongs with the states and local communities. This is a watershed moment in American history. For nearly half a century, unelected bureaucrats in Washington have been dictating how your children should be educated, what they should learn, and what values they should hold. And what have we gotten for more than $3 trillion spent since 1979? Plummeting test scores, declining literacy, and the systematic indoctrination of our children with values most parents find abhorrent. Now, the Department of Education isn't the only failing institution causing Americans pain. Yes, our healthcare system has been pushing dangerous painkillers instead of natural solutions for decades. And just as Trump is dismantling educational bureaucracy, you can free yourself from Big Pharma's grip with Conolidine. This 100% drug-free solution optimizes your body's natural painkillers, providing relief without dangerous side effects or addiction. While the education system reform will take time, your pain relief can start today. Over 1 million Americans, including professional athletes, have discovered Conolidine's power. As President Trump returns education to the states, return control of your pain management to yourself at trycono.com/NNN. You'll find it linked down below. Okay, so let's get into this. This is the battle for education freedom. We played this in a previous clip, but we have to set this whole stage. And of course, it features yours truly outside the White House. Let's check this out.
Student loans and
Good afternoon, Gary Franchi from the Next News Network outside the White House. The birds are chirping. It's a sunny day. Well, back there, President Trump is taking a sledgehammer to the corrupt education system that's been failing America's children for decades. But something is happening in Illinois that could challenge President Trump's plans. I'll have more on that in a moment. But today, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made it crystal clear this administration isn't here to reform the system. They're here to dismantle the entire broken bureaucracy and put power back where it belongs with parents, teachers, and local communities. Now let's talk about the disaster that Trump is cleaning up. And it's a big one. We're talking about the Department of Education wasting $3 trillion since 1979. Math and reading scores have collapsed. 60% of fourth graders can't even do math. 70% of eighth graders can't read at grade level. We rank 28th in the world in math. And what are kids learning instead? Gender ideology, climate hysteria, and anti-American propaganda. Well, Donald Trump, he says enough. And today, Leavitt lit the media on fire when she called out the corrupt teachers unions for running a racket that traps kids in failing schools while their own leaders send their children to elite private academies. And when reporters try to spin it, well, she dropped the hammer. Watch this.
Caroline, what do you say to critics of the president's education plan?
Where was their criticism of our nation's failing test scores for the last several decades? The Department of Education was founded in the 1970s, and since then we have spent more than $3 trillion at this federal bureaucracy. What has been the return on that investment for the American taxpayer? Levels that are less than ideal, less than proficient. Our children's test scores are incredibly concerning when it comes to reading rates, literacy rates, math, and science test scores. The numbers prove that, and the president is finally, this president is finally taking much needed action to return education to where it belongs, and that's to educators closest to students in their classrooms in their respective states. We're going to have a great event here later at 4 o'clock. There will be students here, teachers here, parents here, educators, and of course governors from around the country who are very excited about taking on this responsibility to educate our nation's students.
Who's going to run federal student loans?
So the Department of Education will be much smaller than it is today. As you know, the president's executive order directed Linda McMahon to greatly minimize the agency. So when it comes to student loans and Pell Grants, those will still be run out of the Department of Education. But we don't need to be spending more than $3 trillion over the course of a few decades on a department that's clearly failing in its initial intention to educate our students.
So is the federal government going to be
spending
spending less?
Much smaller than it is. Is it not going to be shut down completely? And then I have a second question.
As I said, Pell Grants and student loans will still be run out of the department in Washington, D.C., but the great responsibility of educating our nation's students will return to the states.
And the Department of Education plays a critical role in enforcing civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination. Who's going to do that now?
Any critical functions of the department, such as that, will remain. But again, we're greatly reducing the scale and the size of this department.
Boom, there it is. No more federal cash for failing schools. No more teachers' unions dictating curriculum. No more indoctrination. It's all over. And get this, Trump is pushing for the largest school choice expansion in U.S. history. He wants parents to decide where their kids go to school, not union bosses or D.C. bureaucrats. But here is the problem. Are you ready for this? The leftist tyranny, it persists. Illinois is advancing HB 2827, a bill that would force private schools and homeschooling families to register with the state, submit medical records, and comply with state mandates under threat of fines, jail time, and even child protective services. That's right. If you don't bow to the regime's education demands, they will come after your family. Now, this flies right in the face of long-standing Supreme Court rulings that protect parental rights. And if Trump is returning education to the states, then his administration must ensure that states don't use that power to trample federally recognized rights, especially for homeschooling families in private schools. Now, some radicals who push gender ideology, CRT, and anti-American filth into public schools, they now want to dictate what private and homeschool families do inside their homes. This is about control. This is about crushing school choice and making sure no child escapes the indoctrination machine. And here is the kicker. HB 2827 won't improve education at all, not one bit. It's just a power grab to bring independent families under the state's boot. If Trump's plan is to dismantle federal overreach, then he also needs to stop state-level tyranny, because if they can force your kid into a failing school or punish you for homeschooling, then education freedom is absolutely meaningless. Parents must be in charge, not bureaucrats, not the state, and definitely not the radical left. Trump is fighting back, but he needs to hear from you. Share this, repost this, and it's time to get loud. Homeschooling families, private schools, everyone needs to know exactly what is at stake. I'm Gary Franchi with the Next News Network, outside the White House on this beautiful day, bringing you the news they refuse to cover.
All right, that was my report outside the White House earlier today, just before the signing took place. I'm joined in studio by Travis Gillmore. He is with the Epoch Times. He's also a White House correspondent. He's an excellent resource. Make sure you follow him on X. He's going to be dropping some big bombshells. So, Travis, what's your initial take before we got a lot of clips to get to? We got Stephen Miller. We got more. Real quick, your take on the end of the Department of Education.
Well, I think this bodes well for a lot of states, but as you mentioned, some states this could be challenging. And I'm a homeschool family. I have a 14-year-old son homeschooled. He's watching right now. Hi, Amaru. And for families that choose homeschool, a lot of this, as you said, is to avoid that indoctrination machine. Mm-hmm. It's to actually let kids excel at what they excel at and not be forced into these ridiculous ideologies. And this is where the states are really going to have to come together, or the people in these states where there's these challenges are going to have to come together and force their state to make a change. This is like the work you're doing, educating people about the potential dangers, in my opinion, this is the gold of this. Trump is definitely making it where it's a states' right issue. Now just we, the people, have to make sure that our states act right and take care of us.
But don't you think that there would be challenges? I mean, with respect to, okay, they're going to start restricting parents in Illinois, and I mean, that goes against so many federal protections for parents. So, I mean, but we're talking about, states versus federal. Like, there's clear delineation in the Constitution that the states have the power to do these things. But what if there is a conflict, like at the Supreme Court level? How do you rectify that action?
Yes, that's going to be a unique challenge, definitely.
Yeah.
And one of the other points you mentioned too is the price per pupil. If you look at California, their metric of success is how much they spend, as opposed to actual test scores or testing above standards. And that's where the country has just really gotten misguided. We've decided that the more we spend on the students, the better they are, instead of actually giving them quality education, leading them down the right path, and allowing them to develop into the human beings that can decide what they want to do with their lives.
Well, that's what happens when you have, public school educated people, and they're like, oh, well, if we're spending a lot, it must be good. But they don't even look at the actual results, and the results speak for themselves. Now, let's listen to what Stephen Miller had to say outside the White House earlier today.
Here in Washington, the Department of Education here in Washington, D.C., is overwhelmingly staffed by radical left Marxist bureaucrats who are in every way hostile to Western civilization, hostile to American interests, and hostile to our founding documents and culture. And so they are using their position and influence inside the Department of Education to try to force agendas like radical gender ideology, like critical race theory, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all kinds of anti-America curricula and policies on the American people, on our students, on our children. So it's taking away from parents the ability to control and direct the education of their own kids, of their own families. So what we're going to do under President Trump's leadership and direction is to return that authority to the greatest extent possible to the local level where parents can control outcomes, while at the same time making sure that no federal funds are used to support racism, to support gender ideology, or support other ideas and principles that are offensive to the American taxpayer.
It's a breath of fresh air to see that, but it terrifies me because what we're seeing, okay, we're going to pass it to the states, but what's happening in Illinois, like, okay, you want to pass it back to the states? Well, now the states are going to step up and they're going to create these, these silos where, you're going to be forced to move. Like if my kid's school doesn't abide by, the fact that in Illinois, they passed a law, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but they passed a law that said that they have to teach the virtues of queer history. Did you know this?
No.
Oh, I actually have the clip of Governor Pritzker. I'm going to find it, and I'm going to play it for you because it's so wild to hear him talking about this. I'm going to find the post. But what are your thoughts on what Stephen Miller was saying?
I think Stephen Miller is just an amazing quote machine too. It doesn't matter what topic he's on. He's just rapid fire truth, and he knows the issues. He knows how to hit the points home. And it's always interesting when we see him come in the briefing room or when he comes out to gaggle at the White House, you always know it's going to be good. There's going to be something that is seriously challenging the status quo.
Yeah, have you had a chance to question him yet?
I have not. No, I look forward to that though.
Okay, I found the clip. I'm going to play it for you now. This is my governor of Illinois. Buckle up. Listen to this.
We expanded Medicaid to cover gender-affirming surgeries. We brought inclusive LGBTQ plus curriculum into our schools so that all students now learn about the contributions of queer and trans trailblazers from Marsha P. Johnson and Harvey Milk. The State Board of Education is implementing gender-inclusive policies to ensure that our schools are welcoming and affirming. And I'm proud to say that my administration is the most diverse administration in state history.
Yeah, that's my governor, okay? That's what we're dealing with in Illinois.
Yes, and we see this from a lot of the leaders on the left catering to this, what's in essentially a small percentage of the
Really
population.
it is, yeah.
They're excluding the majority perspective.
Yeah. Rapid Response 47, the U.S. Department of Education has spent $3 trillion since '79. Since then, per pupil spending has increased more than 245%, with virtually nothing to show for it. There's been basically no measurable improvement in student achievement. Rapid Response 47, why do we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result? Test scores have barely risen since 1970, despite 245% spending increase. American students' math skills slide down world rankings. U.S. children fall further behind in reading, make little improvement in math on national exam. U.S. students' reading scores drop to worst in more than 20 years. Here's another post. Gabe Gudiarny, huge win for higher education in Ohio, abolishing DEI and partisan instruction. Proud to be one of the original 13 proponent testimonies when this was the state Senate. Now it's time for Governor Mike DeWine to sign this into law. Conservatives across Ohio will be watching. Senate Bill 1 passed the House, likely head to the governor's desk a week after Senate concurrence vote. Now, I'm not entirely familiar with this, but if they're able to, abolish DEI in these institutions, I mean, it's racist. It's patently racist.
Yes.
Any way you slice it. Here we have Caroline Leavitt talking about Trump delivering on his promise and returning power to families instead of bureaucrats.
McMahon, President Trump is not failing America's children. He is saving America's children with this action that he will take later today, directing Linda McMahon, our great Secretary of Education, to dismantle this federal bureaucracy that has taken more than $3 trillion from the American taxpayer since its inception in 1979. And what have we had as a result of that investment in our children's education? Declining test scores in reading, writing, and math. Proficiency levels at record lows for 8th graders, for 4th graders, at every level in every state across this country. That's why the president is returning education back to the people, to those closest to our students in our classrooms, and that is teachers and educators and parents who know what is best for their children. And we are excited about this event that will be here later in the afternoon at the White House. We will have parents and educators and students and also governors from across the country who are excited to embrace this new responsibility of educating our nation's children. I will add one more point. The Department of Education has never educated a child. All it has ever done is stolen money from the taxpayers for more regulation that has hurt our children's education. And it's about time a president does something about it. And thank God President Trump is.
Tthank God indeed. Thank God indeed. We got some more clips to get to here. Following a pause in federal funding to Columbia University, they've chosen to comply with White House demands.
How the school handled. Fox News learning that Columbia University is signaling it will comply with White House demands to restore $400 million in federal funding. Trump administration canceled the grants earlier in the month over how the school handled the wave of anti-Semitism on campus. Alexis McAdams, she's been on campus a lot, almost a student.
Now, can you believe I'm in here? No degree. I'm going to ask about it, but nothing yet. But as soon as the Trump administration kind of took over here, they told these Ivy League schools, including Columbia, they were not messing around. They demanded that Ivy League schools like Columbia make major changes on their campus, including banning masks and holding students who participated in what they call illegal protests accountable. So this comes after the Trump administration launched investigations into this university last month. The video you're looking at was from the Hamilton Hall takeover and then those encampments where the students just wouldn't listen to the faculty. The Trump administration says Columbia failed to protect their Jewish students on campus, accusing the school of inaction in the face of persistent harassment of Jewish students. The administration pulling at least $400 million in the funding and the contracts, forcing them to listen up and threatening to cut billions more. The investigation, though, happens as ICE arrested Mahmoud Khalil, who we've talked about. He was the Columbia University grad who led those pro-Palestinian protests on campus. He was just arrested the other day. We now have that video that shows him being taken into custody. He's originally from Syria, now being investigated as a national security threat and looking at deportation. Dozens of other schools have been on notice by the Trump administration. Look at those pictures there. We're talking from everywhere from Harvard to the University of Minnesota.
Travis, what is your takeaway?
Really, this is why people called President Trump the negotiator in chief. When he wants to achieve things, so he can't tell Columbia exactly what to do, but he can take away the federal funding, and then immediately they get in line. And we're seeing this across the board with the men and women's sports, with the tariff negotiations. This is President Trump at his finest, achieving things for the American people just with his negotiation tactics.
Let's take a look. This is moments after the executive order was signed. Beautiful. All right, folks, President Trump was just in here. I'm in the East Room inside the White House, and he just signed the executive order.
beautiful children sitting here, and the Department of Education, the steps to the dismantling of it have now officially begun. History was made today. Governors from many states were here in attendance, and lots of applause, standing ovation. Linda McMahon, of course, also here. She is possibly the last head of the Department of Education. So we'll see how this all pans out. Of course, President Trump has said that key elements of the Department of Education are not going to be dismantled. They'll be basically separated and moved to other departments, other pieces of the bureaucracy of this government, and critical pieces for special needs and other elements within the Department of Education will be preserved. He wanted to make that point very clear. So Gary Franchi right here inside the East Room of the White House. President Trump making history today, and you are a part of it. All right, folks, President
Exciting
Trump.
stuff right there. Certainly was a historic moment. The fact that like you and I were in town for the JFK file release, the dismantling of the Department of Education. I mean, I cannot wait to see what happens next, and it's just exciting to be here. Any thoughts on that?
No, to be an eyewitness to such an historic administration, it's adrenaline rush nonstop, and it's super fun.
Yeah,
you can't beat this.
It really is. Like it's just really is an adrenaline. I mean, I'm living on beef jerky and and protein drinks. You know, like that's my. And I'm just like in and out. Boom, go. We got gaggle. We got press conference, and we got to do a show, and like there's just so much happening. Here's President Trump. This is the official pool video of Trump signing the executive order.
Should I do this?
Little girl does. Yeah, do it.
I was very lucky. I signed another document that turned out to be very good for the country, and I said, let's use that same pen. I don't know, is anybody superstitious? Ron, are you superstitious? Let's use that same pen.
Is there a superstition about using the same pen? Is he making a joke? Is that real?
I haven't heard that before.
I saw Ron DeSantis in the audience. Got some pictures of him. Here's President Trump making a statement regarding teachers.
In this country, I want to just make one little personal statement. Teachers, to me, are among the most important people in this country, and we're going to take care of our teachers. And I don't care if they're in the union or not in the union. That doesn't matter. But we're going to take care of our teachers, and I believe the states will take actually better care of them than they are taken care of right now. They'll work all sorts of systems and even merit systems. Those great teachers are going to be maybe a little bit better rewarded, or maybe that's the way it should be, but the states are going to make that decision. But we're going to love and cherish our teachers along with our children, and they're going to work with the parents, and they're going to work with everybody else, and it's going to be an amazing thing to watch, and it's really going to be something special. And I want to...
And we're not done yet. Here he's talking about returning it to the states.
We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, and this is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do, and it's going to work. Absolutely, it's going to work, and I can tell you from dealing with the governors and others in the state, they want it so badly. They want to take their children back and really teach their children individually. Probably the cost will be half, and the education will be maybe many, many times better. So we look forward to this.
We all look forward to it, yeah. Right? Here he is announcing, okay, so this is where people are getting freaked out about the functions of the Department of Education. I sort of touched on that following the signing. But here's President Trump's own words.
But the department's useful functions, and such as, and they're in charge of them, Pell Grants, Title I funding, resources for children with disabilities and special needs will be preserved, fully preserved. They're all going to be so. If you look at the Pell Grants, supposed to be a very good program, Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs, they're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of them. And that's very important to Linda, I know, and it's very important to all of us. But beyond these core necessities, my administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good. We want to return our students to the states where just some of the governors here are so happy about this. They want education to come back to them, to come back to the states, and they're going to do a phenomenal job. But the department's
what's
useful
interesting about
function,
this? What's interesting is that he's hacking it up. He's hacking it up and he's scattering it to all these other agencies.
Yes.
I think he's learning a lot in this process. As he's going from one agency to the next, learning where his actual executive authority limits are.
Yes.
Like, for example, with the Treasury Department and the IRS and then the USAID and all these other little bureaucracies, some of them do have a congressional mandate that have to be executed.
Yes.
So, like, for example, he can take apart the Department of Education. He can take it apart. Like I joked about, making it in the size of a closet.
Yes.
He didn't destroy it. It's still there, right? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. And I agreed. He's learning not only from his steps here, but he learned a lot from his first administration.
Oh, yeah.
He came into this one just ripping and roaring and then is now adjusting on the fly. So they're smart enough to know that not only do we want to get this passed, we want to win the court cases down the road.
Exactly.
And so it's really, it's ingenious strategy. It's brilliant the way they're making this work.
Well, all of a sudden they throw a legal, roadblock in his face for something else, and then they just basically revealed their cards.
Yes.
And he goes, okay, guys, take note of what they just did here and anticipate it or find a way to do it without having to deal with that same legal roadblock. It's like you said, learning on the fly.
Yes.
It's really exciting to witness this.
And he's got a lot of good people around him.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Today we take the historic action.
very historic action. Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
And that's what he did. So what President Trump did today wasn't just about shutting down a bloated federal bureaucracy. It was about something much more fundamental. It was about asking a critical question. Who should decide how Americans' children are educated? Should it be a distant bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. who's never met your child, or should it be you, your local community, in your state? The results speak for themselves. Despite spending more per pupil than almost any nation on earth, 70% of American 8th graders aren't proficient in reading or math. The Department of Education hasn't just failed, it's actively harmed generations of Americans and made the unions very, very rich. But here's what the media won't tell you. President Trump specifically ensured that essential programs like Pell Grants, Title I funding, and resources for disabled children will be preserved. They'll just be in other agencies. So, I ask you, in the comments, if government control of education has been such a resounding success, why are our children falling behind? Drop a comment below. And support the Next News Network by hitting our merch shop at shop.nextnewsnetwork.com. Grab a coffee mug. Grab a hat, grab a shirt, and, just fill up some brew in the morning and watch us at the Next News Network.